I wanted to give you an update on how the therapy session with my wife went this week. I took many of the responses, comments, and suggestions from my initial post and brought them up with our couples therapist to help navigate some of the core issues affecting our situation. One of the main buzzwords that emerged was resentment. It has been eating me up inside, knowing that my wife keeps telling me she doesn't know why she's resentful or how this affects her emotionally and mentally. I brought this up with our therapist again, and we revisited the conversation about our long history together, being married for 15 years and together since we were 14. Having children when she was 19 and I was 20 significantly changed the trajectory of our lives. We experienced severe poverty and many hardships, essentially having zero social life for the past decade because we were so busy raising our kids, who are now 12 and 14. The therapist asked my wife many questions about her feelings toward this, and 90% of her responses were very our kids focused. It felt like she was afraid to say, yes, it sucked, because she would feel guilt or shame, as if she regretted having the kids. I mentioned this in the session, and the therapist encouraged her to look at this outside the lens of being a mother, to view it more selfishly and individually, which was eye-opening. My wife admitted that she was very frustrated with the fact that we missed out on many things in life. She clarified that she didn't think she missed out on other partners or dating or partying, but certainly lost all her friends. This was huge because one of the big strains in our lives is how isolated we've been. I reminded her of the importance of having good friends and making time for herself and her friendships. For the past 3+ years, we've had multiple conversations about the importance of friends and how they can help in many areas of life that we might not have experience navigating, and simply for enjoyment. However, my wife has always avoided investing in friendships or herself, citing the kids as the main reason. As I mentioned earlier, 90% of her answers related to the kids to some degree. During our session, I began to feel that our kids were a common denominator in most of her frustrations and problems. So I asked her, do you think you may be upset at me because I'm responsible for these kids in the sense that I got you pregnant so young? I wasn't ready for it, but she admitted that she was upset at me for that. She followed up by acknowledging that it was unreasonable, because it takes two to tango. Despite that, it felt like progress because it gave us something to work on and helped alleviate some of these burdens. We agreed to invest more time in nurturing good friendships, both together and individually. Towards the end of the session, we discussed actionable items to take from this session. At this point, everything was still ambiguous and blurry regarding outcomes. I was very direct and forward in asking my wife about her plan moving forward. A note, I had decided prior to the session that if my wife mentioned wanting to remain as co-parenting roommates, I would take the 180 approach and focus on myself. She started by saying the same thing, that she doesn't have any desire to be intimate or sexual with me at the moment, and that she loves me immensely but feels bad for not being there for me. I brought up the brief period when we explored swinging, to which she reiterated for the 50th time that it wasn't a problem. I agreed with her. Swinging was a mechanical approach to solving an existing problem. We mutually stopped and turned the page. I also brought up other life events that might cause resentment, but we didn't get anywhere in identifying the root cause, which was discouraging. I then expressed to my wife that I would not be okay with this arrangement. I told her that I had done everything I could, and that this issue had reached a point where it had nothing to do with me or required me to do anything I wasn't already doing. I was direct in saying that I would not accept this dynamic, and that I needed someone who was actively involved in our marriage, working towards resolutions, and interested in maintaining an active intimacy and sexual relationship. I expressed how it wouldn't be a convenience, and that there was more to life than being roommates and co-parents. I made sure she knew I loved her dearly and wanted this to work for the better. I also told her that I was fully committed to this marriage as long as she was as well, but if she wasn't, that was okay. However, I wouldn't be part of something where these efforts were not reciprocated. I told her I had no plans of leaving and didn't want a divorce, that if this dynamic continued, divorce would be the only outcome. Of course, there were tears, and it was a bleak and sad ending to the session. Still, nothing was resolved, and I walked out feeling very discouraged and determined to start working on the 180 approach as soon as we left the room. It's painful and difficult because much of the 180 requires being short, cold, and transactional. The saddest part is realizing that this dynamic is already very cold and transactional. Here's where it gets very interesting. I started implementing many of the 180 recommendations that same day. I told my wife that things would be different moving forward. I would honor her roommate/co-parent dynamic without reproach, making it clear that I was not happy and would never be okay with it, but I was done working on it if she wasn't. She agreed and went to bed. I began to build distance and focus on myself, being very short and transactional. She asked for help with some of her personal things, which I declined, shocking her. She was upset, saying I was being petulant. I explained that she was now fully in charge of her own life and issues. We didn't talk all day and only spoke when necessary. After a few days of this, she became visibly upset and stressed. Normally, I would react with gestures of help or nurturing, but I didn't this time. That night, she cried, telling me she was stressed and thought something was wrong with me because I seemed indifferent. I simply listened and then told her that this was the dynamic she proposed and that I was taking care of myself and focusing on myself. It has been very hard to be cold and distant because I love her and wish I could hold her and love her. However, I know this is somewhat manipulative to get her way and keep me in the friend zone. So I've been staying the course. After a week of the 180 approach, there have been many changes on her side. I think she is starting to realize there is more to me than just being friends and co-parenting. I sent her a text a few days ago, itemizing bills and separating the financial responsibilities 50/50, and she lost her temper. She told me it was out of left field, to which I responded, "Hey, friends go 50/50, and as your friend I expect nothing less." This was eye-opening, because it showed how much I was taken for granted, and how her comfort and convenience at my expense were overlooked. I pushed through and told her this was the new dynamic she asked for, and it was still a bargain because she would have to be 100% if she were on her own. While the 180 has been working in many areas, I am still very sad about the overall situation. There have been many eye-opening statements and realizations that have not been pleasant to encounter. However, it has also sparked new energy and efforts on her side. She is definitely seeking to talk to me more often, and while it's hard to turn her down, I hope this continues if things improve. I've also noticed that she's making more time for herself aside from being a mom, which is huge because she neglected herself for years. Seeing her be more herself is very pleasing. My hope is that as we work on ourselves, the marriage improves. There is no telling at this point where this will go. We remain cordial and amicable, which is a good sign. Boundaries are set, and expectations are clear. No matter the outcome, I will be at peace with everything we've done. We're continuing couples therapy until we either rekindle our marriage or end in divorce. Having a non-biased third party helps as a witness and a guide through this process. No matter what, I will always love my wife, but I will not participate in a sexless intimacy-less marriage because we both deserve better. Thank you all for the kind words, recommendations, and feedback. I wish you all the best. TLDR, my wife, friend disowned me and wants to just co-parent at my expense, but I started the 180 method to try and find a solution because she doesn't want to work on us. This seems to be working on getting her out of her rut and helping me discover more about how she feels. Also, therapy is paramount and highly recommended for all couples. Relevant comments. The Lone Jackal, how does one dump half of the household expenses on the other person if they share a bank account? Or are your finances kept separately? Just curious how this would work if applied to my life. OOP, excellent question. We shared everything. The proposed 50/50 was suggesting we place the necessary amount to pay bills in the same account, and any leftover money can be deposited to a new account. I think this is why she was very upset. She felt a huge loss of control, knowing she won't be able to monitor my finances. Also, she felt a huge loss in her leftover money with this arrangement, and saw that I would keep significantly more of my own. This is still being worked out because I think she is calling my bluff here, but my plan is to notify her next week as I modify my direct deposit and open a new account. It will definitely be more real there. To be clear, for all the trolls here, yes, she will have less leftover money after responsibilities and it's still enough to live on. She's fine and she's not hurting.